Good morning, everyone. Let me begin by thanking Doctors Bala and Meenakshi Subramanian, Dr. Kannan, all of you involved in NISHDA and in Autocon for having invited us to share our work here. The title was given to me by Dr. Subramanian, and it says Com Deal Approach, Theoretical Basis, Assessment, Intervention, Delivery and Outcomes. Just briefly cover the background within which this whole program has evolved, the triggers for starting the program, its key features, our journey so far and our future directions. Okay, now just a couple of sentences about me and my training. I'm primarily a speech-language pathologist who has an interest both in psychology and linguistics. And my earlier work, I have had two distinct phases in my career. The earlier part was largely with adult neurogenic communication disorders, working with people who have strokes or head injuries. So I was very involved with neurogenic communication disorders. And I'm stating this because I think it has extensively influenced what we do in the Com Deal program. The latter half of my career, nearly another 25 years by now, has been focused on children with autism spectrum disorders. The rationale for the whole program is that they have a series of very subtle issues which we don't detect very easily, and the complications that arise out of these subtle differences, which I will illustrate as I go on, is what we need to address. We emphasize communication. I will talk to you about the experience that we have had so far in this program, the drawbacks, and the future programs that we need to a complete picture of the elephant that Dr. Kannan spoke about. We all like to talk about autism as the elephant with the 10 blind men. Okay, right now the program is based on a loosely structured framework of our understanding of ASD. The theoretical underpinning of the Communication Deal program, I think I will probably illustrate this with the graphics. It will probably be clearer. We believe that it is possibly, it's certainly a biological disorder, possibly neurological, which results in a range of sensory motor and communication difficulties, leading to developmental difficulties and behavioral issues. I want to emphasize parts of this, and I'm saying this because those of you who are aware of the history of autism know the distinct changes that has happened over the last 100 years in our interpretation of autism. So we do believe that it is a biological problem. Mothers are not to be blamed, intelligent mothers or not, and that these result in a range of sensory, motor and communication issues. This is our focus. We don't look upon it as a behavioral problem. The communication and behavioral issues we see as a response of the child to the basic sensory motor and communication difficulties. So this is where our logo comes from. If you see, it's at the top there. Okay, this is where it comes from. The core is the biological part, which, as you all know, there is an extraordinary amount of research going on in countries like the US and the UK, but we are really not close to understanding what is the biological basis, except to suspect that there is a genetic component and of course the various theories that are going on. But that it is biological, I think, is relatively clear. We think that this biological base, whatever it is, which hopefully our scientists, our physicians will help us understand in the near future, results in a lot of differences in terms of processing. Sundar spoke about SI, which really addresses this, and I think we need to see these not as deficits but differences, because it is these very differences which also give rise to the splinter skills, the extraordinary skills that children with ASD sometimes exhibit. And it is not in any one modality. It covers all senses, all five, plus it can vary within a given child. And this is what I think makes it so complex. The other aspect is the motor executive dysfunctions. And this, I think, has been largely neglected in the autism literature until maybe the last 10 or 20 years. We now talk about motor executive dysfunctions at various levels, but there are very many subtle deficits. We have known about the role that occupational therapists play in the management of children with ASD. We learned on the ground that physiotherapists also had a role to play, because we found a whole lot of children with low muscle tone and postural issues, beautiful children who are born, looking really beautiful. And Asperger talks about how some of them are extraordinarily good looking. When they grow up as young adolescents, without intervention, those very beautiful children become very gawky. There are postural deficits. There are a series of differences that you see in them. How do these come about? How do these beautiful children grow up, becoming such gawky adults? And that, I think, is because we miss out on a lot of the motor issues that are there even in very young children. So this is where our model looks at addressing all of this. We see the communication, social, and behavioral issues as a consequence of the code issues. And this is what we try and strengthen in the child at a very young age in order to help him function in mainstream society. That is where our logo comes from. Okay, why did we focus on early intervention? This program started in the year 2000. Actually, it was a response to the dire needs of parents on the ground. I had worked with a few children who had done well, and one of them went on to write his autobiography, which was published by the time he was 9 years old by the British National Autistic Society. And BBC did a documentary on him. This was when he was 9 years old. That got to be known, and he had written about a lot of the work that we had done with him in this autobiography. So parents of children, started heading towards us saying, do something for our children. The problem was there were so many of them, and there were so few of us, who wanted to do this work, that the numbers just didn't work. We said, let's, focus on very young children, because that's the one that makes the best long-term impact. There was an acute shortage of intervention programs in India, and please remember that I'm talking about 18 years ago. Even in a city like Bangalore, where we are based, which is known for the services it offers. One of my master's students did a dissertation on services in Bangalore, and she found that families of children as young as 18 months, 26 months, were traveling from, say, in Jayanagar, where they lived, to Henno Road to get speech therapy for 45 minutes. From there they go to Indiranagar to get occupational therapy for another 45 minutes. A third place to get special educator to work with the child. The whole day, mother and child spending in this car, going from point to point. Of course, Bangalore traffic is now infamous. So the whole day was spent in doing this, and the impact was very, very marginal. So we decided that this had to be addressed, and all of these services had to be provided within a setting under one roof, without the parent having to go from one person to the other. We also knew that there were lack of adequate facilities for sustained intervention. There is an acute shortage of therapists. Speech therapists are very few and far between, despite the many colleges that have come up. And within that too, speech therapists who want to work with children with ASD is, I think, 0.0001%. Okay, the results are not there, the money is not there. So it was extremely difficult to find enough therapists for the spiraling incidence of ASD. The costs were steep. Okay, who could afford to sit in a car and run around the whole day paying therapists for individual sessions? And of course, the steeply increasing number of children, which we have all experienced. So we focused on early intervention because we felt that it was the most economical way in which we could maximize the effect of our scant resources. Okay, so this was the reason, and I think it's really paid dividends. Not that we need to stop here. My intention was, in fact, when I started in the year 2000, to put this program in place and then focus on supporting these children through the school ages. But this has taken, as you will see, so much of our time and attention that we're just now beginning to move into other areas. So this program has been published as a program. The details, some of which I will be sharing with you today, is in this program manual, which was published in 2008. In addition, we do a series of tests, basic details, case histories, things like that, referral details. The CDDC, or the Communication Deal Developmental Checklist, is the backbone of our intervention. And I will illustrate how. We also do a series of other assessments. As we go on, we keep adding to it. Our program is primarily a multidisciplinary program. We started with occupational therapists, speech therapists, and developmental educators. We also have developmental psychologists, and in the recent past, we have added physiotherapists. Now, we do this not one-on-one, but in a group intervention. And there were two reasons why we focused on the group intervention. The first one was that all of us work with children one-on-one, and we do see the change, the families see the change. But then when a child picks up sufficiently for us to tell the family, now, take him to a regular school, they put him in a regular school and the child slides down. And that is because he can do all of this in the comfortable environment of his home, with his parents, with his therapist, but to hold his own with his peers is extremely difficult, and he slides back. So we said we have to address this, and that is why we started group intervention. Okay, unlike most therapists, we have 12 children and 3 therapists on the ground on a day-to-day basis, 3 hours a day. The child doesn't go from speech therapist to occupational therapist to psychologist. They come there and they manage these 12 children. And initially it was very difficult because most of our therapists balked at having to work with more than one child, because we're trained to do that. But once they faced it and their comfort level set in, it actually became easier because children learn from each other, not necessarily only from the adults. And the bonding happens. You see that they're able to communicate with peers without additional support. Plus we found that there were the additional benefits of bringing costs down. When we worked it out, the cost for one independent session of either speech therapy or occupational therapy was what it cost in our program for 3 hours in 4 sessions of speech, occupational therapy, education psychologist, and group activities. So it brought down the costs. It also brought down our dependence on professionally trained people. Instead of having to look for 12 therapists for 12 children, we were now managing with 3 therapists for 12 children. So these were the additional benefits of the program. And as we worked with the children, it's been a constant learning experience. It hasn't stopped, and I'm sure, we have much to learn as we go on. So we keep adding to our assessments. I will illustrate that as we go on. This is the Communication Developmental Checklist, which was formalized from 2005 to 2007 and published in 2007. I will show you the profiles. We went with the profile idea right away, right in the beginning, because our concern for the child with ASD was twofold. One, we knew about all of the specific difficulties that they had, which Sundar illustrated beautifully this morning. So there were professionals with special skills needed to address this ASD-specific issues. But we also knew that all of this interfered with the learning of the child, the growth of the child like his peers. So we knew that we also had to, in order to help this child address the negative issues which were interfering with his development, but also support him in his development to bring him up to his age level as rapidly as possible, because only then did he have a chance in mainstream society. And we were very clear that that was the focus. We knew that they could do it, so we wanted to get them young, work with them intensively, and get them into mainstream society and help them sustain themselves and the families in mainstream society. So this was a very clear-cut goal. So we were very conscious about time. That is something that, accountability for time is something that we as clinicians don't pay any heed to. For us, it was very important, because if a child doesn't catch up by the school age entry of 6 years, or isn't close enough to the skills of a 6-year-old child, his chance to mainstream are next to nil. Okay, I've seen years of working with children with hearing impaired children and other communication disorders, where we just say, go put him in a regular school, and the government now encourages that. But there is very, very little support. It's a competitive world out there, and these children can seldom really gain from being in a mainstream school unless they are prepared for it. And this is what we wanted to do. So we were very conscious about the time frame and how rapidly the child needed to move. What we tell our new therapists is that in 3 months' time, show us 6 months worth of progress in this child. Okay, only then can you close the gap. In fact, it's gotten better, and I will illustrate this. But when we first looked at this developmental profile, we didn't have anything in India which was indigenous. This program has been completely indigenous, responding to the needs of our people. Initially, we took tools like VSMS for social skills and cognitive skills, readings for communication, but that's only up to 3 years. Only then did it extend higher. Motor skills, what the occupational therapist brought in. So it was a kind of a patchwork, and it wasn't working very well, apart from the fact that these were Western tools, standardized there, and were not really ideal for our situation. So that is the reason why we standardized this tool from 2005 to 2007. The details are in this manual. I will not go into the specific details. But these are the 8 sections that we assess children in. And this is the profile that we get for each child. As I said, this is the backbone of our assessments and monitoring progress in a given child. Sorry, there I go with this technology. I want to highlight. So you see, what we do is gross motor skills, fine motor skills, ADL skills, receptive language, expressive language, cognitive skills, social skills, emotional development, all as matched to a population of the same chronological age from India using this. So we find that the child's gross motor skills are reasonably good. There is a gap here. Fine motor skills also, there are gaps, and I will show you more. This is a very young child who's barely 2 years old. This is the age bar, okay? But this is a very typical ASD profile that we get, where you see huge gaps in communication and social skills. The 5-point scale was also something that we introduced in 2007, because unlike other children, as has already been illustrated in the morning, children with ASD function depending on the environment that they are in, the individual that they are with. So if he's learned a skill, it doesn't mean that he'll uniformly use it everywhere. And for us, for the child to be mainstream, he had to do it anywhere with anybody, which is the green. Whereas the red means that the skill is not there at all. The yellow means that he's doing it maybe with his therapist, maybe with his family, but not really elsewhere. And the blue means that he's doing it most of the time, though if you put him under pressure, he will be unable to perform. So this is the profile that gives us an insight into what to do with this child, apart from all of the ASD specific issues. Okay, I will come to that too. And it also helps us to monitor the child's progress. So what happens here is the OTPT work with this, the speech therapist works on these, and the educator and psychologist work on these. So the team is there addressing each of these. In addition, we have all of these other assessments. And I won't go into details. A lot of these have been added as we found issues with the children. So anytime we pick up a gap, we try and address them by getting assessment tools, by getting intervention kits, and I will illustrate some of those too. So there is a series that goes on, increasing every year, and each child's profile has all of this, and the team and the family have access to all of this. So this is the baseline, what happens in the program. I would like to spend a little time in this because this is not reflected in the baseline, but this is something that we learned on the ground. Because we represented so many different disciplines and we are trained to focus on any one aspect of the development, very few of us give attention to the basic skills, the basic prerequisites. And these could be things like attention, compliance, eye contact, joint attention, all of these which we know are disturbed in children with ASD, but there is very little literature in terms of how much of this is normal. There is no normative data. And the literature regarding how do you assess this, how do you intervene with this, and how much do you drive the child towards was also not there. But we found that when we started working on the ASD specific issues and the profile, some children did well, some children started showing gaps in the profile. And we said, why is this happening and what needs to be done? And that is what drew our attention to the prerequisite learning skills. As a speech therapist, I don't pay a lot of attention to is the child attending. My attention is on is he understanding and is he speaking. So that is where we started working on prerequisite learning skills. We set up some normative data, we assess it, and we address it. We also picked up issues in feeding, toileting, which the literature hardly mentions. Yet when you work with these children, you know that a sizable proportion of them have these issues. Sensory issues have been picked up and they are addressed. So what we now do is when a child comes into the program, and of course all parents, because they know that this was started by a speech therapist, they want the child to speak first. Unfortunately, that is the last to come, the very last to come. So we now tell the parents for 3 months, you check out everything that you want to, come here, but if you come here for 3 months, don't ask us what the improvement is. Because this is what we focused on in the first 3 months. And when we do this, 4 weeks, 6 weeks down the line, we see beaming parents saying that, he is feeding, he is doing that, and the changes already become visible. That gets off to a head start. We also use a very simple technique which was taught to me as a student, which we use for children with delayed speech. But I find that it's extremely useful to help parents and therapists connect with the child. Dr. Kannan spoke about mindfulness and how mindfulness is becoming extremely important. It is extremely important for children with autism in particular because these are capable children. Many of them are capable children and understand a lot more than we think they understand. And for us, we generally take a non-speaking child as a piece of furniture, as though he doesn't understand. So you discuss him and all of his issues in front of him. That child is tuned in. The majority of them are tuned in. So mindfulness between therapists, families, and children is extremely important. And this is a simple way we've tweaked the original method in order to connect with children. And it's amazing how this helps. Behavioral issues, stimming, all of those. When you are mindful and you address what's going on in the child's mind, all of this comes down. How do we link the CDCC profile to intervention? They are illustrated step by step in these manuals. All of the areas are covered. We have two of those you've already seen, that's the program manual and the CDDC. This addresses issues that parents face. This is the prerequisite learning skills. Before we go on to the actual developmental profile, there are four that address children between 0 to 3 years. We've also added AAC, that is a component of alternate communication for children who are non-verbal. And then there are four which deal with children with from 3 to 6 years of age. What do we do here? Each of those steps which are in the CDDC and many more. What went into the CDDC were those which gave us statistically significant differences. But there are many items in between that may not be statistically significant but are milestones. So we've designed a lot of simple IEPs for each of these targets, more than one. All of these have been field tested in India, with Indian families, with Indian materials. Only when it works has it gone into the manual. So step by step, a therapist or a family can work on building these skills for the children. These are now available in English, Hindi and Kannada. We have somebody interested in translating them into Tamil and are being extensively used, strangely, well not strangely, unexpectedly from our part at least, more by therapists than by parents. So this is the international edition which was published last in 2017 in the United States, and after the publication of this edition, we have had interest from outside the country even before, but now that this is available internationally, we are looking at helping children outside the country too. Okay, so how do we link it? I shared this profile with you all. Here is a child, who has in receptive language, inconsistent skills, understanding prepositions on, under, front, behind, etc. Okay, the child does it some of the time, but not all of the time. So if this is the base here, the speech therapist will move on to, it says 2, the score. So this is the lesson plan. And these are very, very simply very, very simply illustrated so that you don't have to have professional training to do this. So each of those items in the CDDC have matching lesson plans and more. So you pick that up and you work. It shows you how to work with the child. How do we monitor progress? This is a child whose profile I started with. The child was barely 21 months old, but already very, very clear deficits. Okay, supports early identification and early intervention. The team works with the child, both in terms of ASD specific issues, which is not illustrated here, and the developmental profile. And then by November end, this is what you see. Okay, the age bar has gone up because he is about 6 months older in November. But you see how the profile changes. A lot of the motor skills event major issues, but he still needs support as he goes on. Receptive language has shot up. He now understands and complies. Not just understands, he is complying with instructions. Along with receptive language, often expressive language goes up, but it is slower. Okay, and there's still a gap here. Okay, the other skills, social skills, he's doing much better. Okay, a child like this, continues till March end. Our program begins in June and ends in March, in time for the next academic year. A child like this, we are very happy to bid goodbye to. Okay, and we say take him to a regular school. So this is the best case illustration. They don't all come that young. And when they come in older, it becomes even harder. Here is a slightly older child, 2.5-year-old. Again, you see the profile, you don't need explanations here. But once again, you will see that motor is relatively good, but there are issues. Communication is a big problem. Social skills are a big problem. And this is the same child in November end, and this is a child, same child again by March end. Now for a child like this, we will say, put him into a supportive school where the teacher is supportive, the administration is supportive. Bring him to us for a few individual therapy sessions. Wherever these gaps are still persisting, we target that in individual sessions. Okay, now I'll show you a third profile. Even older child. This child is close to 3.5 years. Okay, so you see the gaps are bigger. But even this child picks up and does reasonably well. Again, for this child, I've advised we keep 90% overall developmental scores as the borderline. A few points here and there, depending on the family, the school, etc., we're willing to let go. We say that bring him for individual therapy, we will still address these issues, but put him in a supportive regular school. Not all of them move that well. See, the child gets older, the problems are more persistent. And I'll show you this one. Okay, where you can clearly see that even after 2 years of intervention, okay, the profile continues after 2 years intervention, this child remains non-verbal. Okay. Now, this is the biggest problem that we are now facing. If you look at the literature on autism right from the beginning, you will see that earlier 50-50 used to be considered the non-verbal as against the verbal. With early identification, early intervention, things are changing. It gradually changed to 60-40. We're now talking about 70-30, provided the child gets early intervention. But there is that percentage. 30% is still a high proportion. And unfortunately, the so-called theories of autism ignore this population completely. All of the experimental work is done with children who can be interacted with in an experimental situation. The non-verbal children get left out completely. And this is the profile of the kind of non-verbal child that we see, where everything else starts improving. This child, after 2 years, a lot of the other issues, including his cognitive skills. Please look at this. Okay, the cognitive skills here were not all that great. But if you see, with the support, there's a lot of difference made, but the child remains non-verbal. Okay, and these are the ones that we are struggling with. We initially, as good speech therapists, we would look at the receptive language. Once a child settles down, receptive language goes up. And a speech therapist's expectation is that when the receptive language climbs up, the expressive also starts moving up. So we were aware that there was a proportion which had issues with vocalizing and production of speech, but we would wait for that discrepancy to manifest. That is, even with improving receptive skills, if the expressive skills did not move, then we would start looking at the oromotor structures. But sometimes it became too late, as in the case of this child. And we learned this from our post-hoc study in 2010. So what we now do is, we start with the oromotor evaluation and intervention right away once the child settles down, rather than wait for this picture to emerge. Because once this sets in, even when the child is doing reasonably well in other areas, no school will take him. And that becomes a big problem. We're also working on using other AAC devices, including those based on tablets and phones. If I have the time, I will briefly share that with you. Okay, so it's the same child. We start introducing AAC. You see one more column is up there in all of the profiles. And it starts doing a few more things through the non-verbal mode. But the non-verbal mode can only address certain issues, not all of them. Okay, what we're now doing is trying to link the ASD-specific issues with the developmental profile. Dr. Kannan in the morning spoke about how in the meta-studies it's very difficult to see the impact of the results because different professionals bring different tools. And the scoring methods, the quantitative methods are very different. So we struggled with this too because this part is done by the psychologist and the educator. This part is done by the speech therapist. This part is done by the OT. With different backgrounds, different tools, and we didn't know how to put it into a profile. Finally, we struck upon the idea of converting these into percentages. Percentages in terms of the chronological age of the child. So we now link all of those ASD specific issues with the profile. Okay, and intervention is both for this as well as this. Bring this down, take this up. Okay, and get them to change from red to green. And that is what you see happening across a period of time. You see even the other ASD specific issues are settling down. Okay, so this is the way forward which we hope to go to and collect. We have a considerable amount of data on which we need to do further analysis. I mentioned that any time we picked up an issue. Yes, please.
The previous slide,
Yeah.
I didn't get the connection between the top half and the bottom half.
See, what we do is this is an independent set of assessments.
Okay.
Okay?
These are not checklists.
Pardon?
This is not the CDDC.
No, this is the CDDC. Those are not the CDDC.
Okay, those are not.
Those are tools that some of them we have worked upon and published. Some of them, say for instance, sensory integration is done by an occupational therapist. We have devised assessment procedures for oromotor skills and intervention kits for oromotor skills, for PLS, for all of those. Okay? So that is a different set. And those are addressing ASD specific issues. This is the development. And you see the link between them.
Yes.
We have quantitative scores and we have normative data on young children when they learn to do this. Okay, so those quantified scores are converted into this. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
If the child is a number,
Yeah. Yeah.
So in such a case, how do you work with the jaw movement and the tongue movement when it is a non-verbal, an autism child?
There are measures of assessing it, and there is an oromotor kit
Yeah.
which illustrates
Okay.
how to do it. So each of these is designed to address those things. These are the communicators. Let me see if the oromotor kit is somewhere here. Yes, this one with the straws and things like that. Do you see it here? This one? Yeah? That's the one. And there is an assessment procedure also. I don't know whether it's been included here. If you go to our website, you will find all of this. There is an assessment procedure with norms, okay, which will indicate how to use this kit. Okay, and it addresses both the sensory issues and the motor issues. Okay. The pragmatic skills, social interaction, all of these, as and when we found issues, we have had different people working on them. So there is a range of assessments and there is a range of intervention tools also. This is the list. I have left a few copies with Dr. Subramanian of the materials that we have. Those of you who may be interested, welcome to access them. Okay, now I go back to Dr. Kannan and the evidence base. We are clinicians first and foremost, but we also come from an academic theoretical background, and we were very aware that this was a program that started here in this soil, not influenced by the Western theories that were there in existence. We wanted to do something for our children, we got into it and did it. But of course, as the demand for the program grew, people wanted to know what was the evidence for it. So it was important for us to build up the evidence too. These are some of our papers. All of them are freely accessible on academia.edu. This is something that I would like to spend a little time on, because these are the measures that we are taking to help nonverbal children. When in 2013 we published our 10-year review of the children who had come to the head office, we found that 76% of our children were mainstream in regular schools. Out of the 24% that didn't, there were a large number with behavioral issues. Please also remember that when we started, the average age was much higher. Okay, as we've gone on, the average age has come down and the results have got even better. So the 24% who didn't mainstream, some of them had behavioral patterns which were very well entrenched and the school found it difficult to manage. But a considerable number were non-verbal children who had good skills but they were non-verbal and therefore the schools shut their doors on them. And we felt that we had to do something for these children. So one was trying to get them to verbalize, of course. The second was to give them alternate modes. And some of these children do quite well. They are bright children. And when the parent commits himself or herself to it, they do homeschooling, they take them to alternate schools, and still give a life to this child. So we have done a fair amount of work in collaboration with Matthew Belmonte from UK and some IT people from Bangalore. And this is being used extensively in the UK now. With the proportion of children who are non-verbal going down in our clinics, we are not using it as much, but people are using it extensively outside. Again, these are all the autism Conveal specific publications that we have. You are welcome to access them. I will just illustrate one or two of these. This was published in the Indian Journal of Pediatrics, I think in the year 2010. And basically we took one group of children, 30 children who were in the head office. It was simple, straightforward, no RCT, okay, just a pre and post. But we had two independent measures from people who were not in the program. One was a psychologist from the Chandrasekhar Institute who did CARS to measure the behavioral changes. And the CTDC was done by a student, a master's student from the same institute. And this is the change that we saw in a period of 8 months. A second study we published in 2013, and at that time we were really targeting Indian pediatricians because they are the people that children go to. So we wanted to share this information and sensitize pediatricians to the fact that if you identify the child early and work with them, there was a great chance of this child getting mainstreamed. So this follow-up study we did of all of the children who were enrolled in our program from the year 2000 to the year 2009. And we found that 76.4% of the children had remained in mainstream schools. Okay, 1 to 9 years because we started the follow-up study in 2010. So those who enrolled in 2009 had only 1 year, but those who enrolled in our program in 2000 had covered 9 years in mainstream schools. For me, the biggest satisfaction in the last few years has been in the months of April and June. I have parents coming back to me and saying, you may not remember us, but our child was in your program in 2001, 2002. He is now in school, he is now in college. One of them even graduated with a degree in philosophy from the London School of Philosophy. That is the best satisfaction, but nevertheless, this is something that we have to do because we need to build up our evidence. I think as we go on, this figure of 76.4% will improve. Because as you saw, when the kids come younger, the changes are faster and the chances of them being retained in mainstream schools is higher. Okay, this is, we started the program November 1st, 2000. And at that time, because I wanted 4 therapists for 12 children, I told the parents, I can't get external funding for this. If you will share the expenses, then we will start it. And I was visiting the Chandrasekhar Institute as a visiting professor. They very kindly gave me a room half the size of this room, and we started it there. By April, the parents had seen enough changes in the child that they wouldn't let me stop the program. It was supposed to be an experimental program. By 2002, we had 3 centers in Bangalore. By 2003, we had 6 centers. 3 in Bangalore, 1 in Mumbai, 1 in Mangalore, and I forget where the 6th one was. 2 groups in Chandrasekhar Institute. So it just grew, exponentially, and I found it very difficult to cope with it. That's when I started the trust. Until then, we didn't even have a trust. We just started the program. So 2003, we started the trust. 2004, we set up the office of the trust. And we decided that, and by then I had 13 requests pending for new units. And I knew that there was no way that we could cope with it unless we documented the program, and we submitted a proposal to the Tata Trust. They gave us a small grant under women's issues for the first phase for 2 years when we standardized our normative procedures. And once they saw the result of that, they supported us very generously. So we went on to design, field test, publish all of the intervention procedures. And in the last phase, from 2011 to 2000, it's just finishing this year, we started scaling it across the country. So these are our current units. We had more, we had set up more. But sometimes it's not always viable. My friend and colleague Rupa Nagaraj is here. She was very interested, and started a great unit here. They did very well, but there were managerial issues. There are issues that are on the ground that we have to learn to foresee. I mentioned already we don't have enough therapists. We found the therapists would come and work for 1 year. Why? Because they wanted the certificate. Has worked in an early intervention program. Great demand for people with experience in early intervention programs outside the country, so they would want the certificate. So 1 year, it became just training for us. These are not the most sought after jobs, so finding therapists was hard. And these are the problems that people who scale up also find. They employ, they train, they come to Bangalore, train with us, they learn the skills, and then they disappear. In other places, we found managerial issues. It doesn't work very well in a big hospital where people are used to high turnover and high financial turnover also. Neither of them does this fit in with. So there are many practical issues, but the demand for scaling up is very high. We are just finishing this phase of scaling up in March, the end of March. We've introduced a star rating system for all of our units. So there is supervision, there is monitoring, and we're doing this largely because when we ask parents to contact us to go to X, Y, or Z unit, they ask us how do they compare with you. So we're doing inspections, we're doing the star rating, and the fidelity that you mentioned this morning is a big issue. Okay, everybody likes to say you had complete training, we've done it, but the fidelity is very, very varied. And we would, of course, like them to be true to the program. Next phase, we are planning a lot of things. I mentioned this already. There is something that I'm not. Okay, I mentioned the commitment, the recruiting, retaining staff problem. Documentation and time management is just not there amongst us. Okay, and therapists resist it so much, they don't want to spend the time documenting. Yet, unless we document it, we don't really make progress, nor do we build evidence. And believe me, once you learn it, please talk to my colleagues. Okay, once you learn it, it helps you rather than become accountability and time frame. We have no accountability to our client. You want, you come. If you don't want, you don't come. Group intervention. I've had any number of my co-professionals say, don't go to the group intervention, one-to-one, full focus on your child. We are not looking at anybody, so this is the best. Okay, so we are looking at documenting how group intervention is probably better than individual intervention. Interdisciplinary interactions. When I first started, occupational therapists looking that way, speech therapists looking a third way, developmental educator looking yet in another direction. Today, I see them not only, they meet on the profile. The family and the team meets on the profile. That is the point that draws them. Day-to-day discussions. With the family, we made it once a week because they were breathing down the therapist's things. But what they did was, and to my pleasant surprise, last year I had an occupational therapist who did a great job of parallel talk. She picked up the parallel talk manual, we illustrated it to her. She is doing occupational therapy, she is doing sensory integration, but she is using parallel talk with the child. And that to me was one of the biggest rewards again of the kind of interdisciplinary interaction and learning that happens in our groups. The slow nature of change. Okay, this of course we have to fend off parents because we're coming to speech therapists. 4 weeks, 6 weeks, you're not saying a single word. Single word doesn't come in 4 weeks, 6 weeks. There is so much to be in place before that word can emerge. But I think we're gradually battling it, and the people who have helped us the most in this are the parents of the children who have already gone through. So now we don't spend time, we say, let's say, go talk to this parent, their child is in the program for the second year. Okay, or we send them to other parents. We have parent testimonials on the website, we have a parent association. So we're trying to get them to speak for themselves and supporting them in their battles. Parent-family dependence. Okay, now apart from the core program, based on needs again, we have evolved quite a few new programs. The pre-deal program is a mother-child program. And then again, it was born out of necessity. In our Bangalore office, we only take children into 1 or 2 groups of each of the models that we are trying to propagate, because we want that to be the showpiece. Anybody wants to come and see how we do it, they're welcome to come and see it there. But we are not encouraging numbers. We don't want 5 groups of the same program going on, because it just becomes too difficult for us to handle. Plus, we think that children should get this wherever they live. We have had families relocating from the United States, from Australia, from the Middle East. That should not be the solution. That can't be the solution. And that is the reason why we went into scaling up. Even in Bangalore, we are encouraging people to start as many units as possible. We have 5 there, and it looks like this year we're going to have another 4 more. Okay, so that's the kind of development that we want for this program. We don't want everybody to come to our head office. So what happened in this, the pre-deal program, the trigger was that when I came into the office, I would see a lot of young mothers with their children. Okay, young babies, generally below the age of 2.5 years. And they would wait for one-on-one sessions. So then I asked my colleagues, I said, why should they be spending so much time just for one session coming all the way? Why don't we start a group program for them too? And everybody said, no way. And they had sound reasons. Okay, they were good clinicians, but they had sound reasons. They said, these children are not potty trained. Some of them can't even walk properly, and there will be accidents and things like that, and we can't take the responsibility. And that is when we decided we'll have the mothers in. In any case, the mother is waiting with the child. So this became a parent-child program where the mother is in with the children. In a group again, 12 mothers, 12 children. First 3 months, we allow the mother to work with her child. After 3 months, compulsorily she has to move on to some other children. So the same program, but the delivery is through the mother. The team is there, but the service delivery is through the mother, and this is where we are getting the best results. Okay, because the mother carries that training home, and she's doing it. So that's where we see the most rapid changes. The family-mediated intervention program, we are very aware that either because of distance, lack of access to a clinic, or because of cost, or lack of transport, whatever, not everybody who needs this clinic-based program can really access it. So for those who cannot access it on a day-to-day basis, and for those who may be living in remote areas, rural areas, we designed the family-mediated intervention program, where the same procedure, the same assessments, the same intervention, but the family comes to us once in a fortnight, and the team sits with the family, and each of them show the parent how to do a certain lesson plan or board where the child is. We did it only for the autism spectrum disorders, but sometime I think in 2010 or 11, we had a meet of our affiliates in Goa, at which meet, one of our affiliates who's from Varanasi, who's a huge center providing services. It's called the Kiran Center. Their services are to the rural population, and they work with children from all disabilities. So they said, we don't have any such structured program for other children. Children with cerebral palsy, children with intellectual challenges, and why is it that you're restricting this to ASD? So then we said, we have no issues with you doing it for other children also, provided all of the other inputs, say a hearing aid for a hearing impaired child, or the orthotic prosthetic aids for a CP child, they have to be in place, and then you can use the development framework. And some of them had great results with children with cerebral palsy, children with intellectual challenges. So now we are also expanding it to other children with developmental disabilities. There is a group of ENT surgeons who are involved in cochlear implants who now are trying it with their children too. So we now have these children coming 3 times a week after school, where the focus is on social communication. And this is probably something that will, this is yet to be published, but will also probably grow more in the future. In progress, we have a software. I illustrated how we link the evaluation to the manual. All of this is now being converted into the digital format. So our hope is that over the next year or so, beginning June, we will do it with all of our affiliate centers. But once we have the experience and the confidence that it is relatively glitch-free, we are going to open it up to any parent, any child who has a mobile phone. Again, the same structure, but it will be, the service delivery will be through a mobile phone. That is the plan. We want to expand FMIP to other developmental disorders. And of course, we're now advocating comprehensive profile-based intervention for all children with disabilities, rather than go by IQ scores or narrow measurements such as those. We are trying to translate the material into several Indian languages. Malayalam and Tamil are high. The CTDC has been done in Bangla and is being used both in West Bengal and Bangladesh. We are looking at the digital platform for identification, screening, assessment and intervention. School-based units, one of my pet projects. The early units that we had started in Bangalore, among the 6 of them, 2 were actually in schools. And to me, that was one unfulfilled dream as yet, because when I went to those schools, the only reason why this happened was my granddaughter was studying in one of those schools. And when they realized what I was doing, they kind of showed some interest, and we set up a school-based unit. They were a very well-meaning group of people, but even a group of well-meaning teachers and the management said, your children can come to that classroom and our children will come into this. Your children can come at 9 o'clock, ours will come at 9:30, etc., etc. I said, fair enough, we will do it. Within 3 to 6 months, and the parents of the other children, they were very worried about the parents of the typical children. All those prejudices vanished. The children played together. When a child started picking up, the teachers took them into the regular classroom. So it was a great model for us. Unfortunately, what happened was, I had gone into it saying that for 3 years I would support them completely, where I was sending the staff from our head office, busing them from our office, they would manage it. So they were really not engaged except providing the space and looking after the finances. The 3 years went up to 6 years, and I said, look, I can't keep doing this because there are so many other things. And I would get calls, Jayanagar school, no water running in the bathrooms. I said, this is it, I can't do this anymore. Unfortunately, they were unable to take it on because they pointed out 2 reasons: access to professional staff and the salaries of the professional staff, which was not comparable to that of teachers. So we closed those 2 units, but it's always been in my mind that eventually community unit should not be in hospitals or clinics, because a child should not have to go to a hospital or a clinic on an everyday basis for a year or 2 years. They should be in schools because they are among other children. There are a whole lot of other benefits. You sensitize the larger public, you smoothen the way for the child to transition into regular school. The additional support that the child needs can be provided by the same team even when he goes to higher classes. So I've been wanting to do this, but there was no response really from the schools. We tried talking to school managements for perfunctory interest, yes, but not enough commitment to take it forward. Last year I saw a change. I was talking to several groups of educators, and after those talks, people came up and said, you mentioned school-based units, we might be interested. And that's partly because of the change in policy where they are encouraged to. Strangely enough, the so-called international and the high-profile schools have teams in their schools now and resource rooms. but they are helpless because a lot of them don't know how to cope with this. So initially they came saying we would like you to start to help us, to help their teams. Now I also have representatives of a big chain of schools come to me and saying, let's start with 2 modules and let's see how it goes. We already have 1 unit in a school in Bangalore, and that has done exceedingly well. So we already have a model there for people to visit and see. So that is my hope, that eventually all of our units will move to schools. The digital platform, of course, for screening and identification. We do a lot of training for different groups of people. We also have a certificate program. I've left some flyers with Dr. Subramaniam. So if anybody is interested, you're welcome to get in touch with us. These are the areas that we want to focus on in terms of research. I explain the reasons why. The last one is close to my heart again, to get proper insights into root disorders. And I think we have large data now. We see about 250 to 300 children in our clinic for assessments every year. We have 20 odd units. They see a minimum of 10 in the group and certainly more for evaluations. And we're collating all of this data. So we do want to put it into use back to understand the problem and to refine our own methods of assessment and intervention so that the program can get better. So thank you.